Hello world. This is one of the more difficult types of review to write. You want to offer a meaningful critique, but you don't want to appear disrespectful or dismissive of the very dark themes that the game in question uses. All I can say is I'll do my best, and that the game I'm covering today includes themes of alcoholism, domestic abuse, and sexual violence. That game is called Repentant, it's from Anate Studios, and it begins like this. We open with a look at Oliver, surrounded by bottles and listening to a pair of answering machine messages. The first is from what I presume to be his ex-wife, demanding that he stop contacting her for reasons that are clearly made out to be Oliver's fault. The second message is from Oliver's friend Sergey, who has a business opportunity, in quotation marks. It's dodgy enough that he won't explain it over the phone, but he'll still admit it's not exactly legal in a recorded message. Sergey asks Oliver to meet up with him and, knowing about Oliver's substance problems, tells him to avoid anywhere that sells alcohol along the way. So we first gain control of Oliver outside of a store, and this is where the game's flashy presentation begins to fall apart. Up until now we've been presented with a very dramatic story, the alcoholic who loses his family and returns to a life of crime. And it's helped a lot by the quality of the artwork and music used to present it. What doesn't help with this is the voice acting, or what I actually suspect is the fault of the voice direction. Then again, sometimes they're doing the best with the lines they have. I don't know what language this was written in, but I highly suspect it wasn't English, despite that being the only language with voice acting. Interesting list of languages to choose from too: English, Russian, Ukrainian and Dutch. Wasn't expecting that combination. But anyway, back to the voice acting we do have. The emotions are conveyed correctly for the most part, if a little subdued, but small things like avoiding the use of contractions or repeatedly stating facts we and the characters already know makes everything sound stilted. It reminds me that these are actors reading from a script, and that disconnect is one of the last things you need when you're telling this kind of story. Then we get to the first puzzle, in which Oliver needs to make a phone call and this phone booth is too dark for him to see what he's doing. In a lot of other adventure games, setting up an elaborate system of reflections in full view of someone else wouldn't seem all that out of place. Other adventure games, however, will often have a comedic bent, some kind of non-contemporary setting, or a set of factors that allow for or even necessitate this kind of Rube Goldberg process. This is just a guy hanging out in front of a store who wants to use the phone, and yet you have to implement an extremely adventure gamey puzzle solution. That doesn't gel with the tone they're going for. And then he'll end up standing directly in the path of the light source he just set up. It feels like a stereotypical adventure game puzzle that was shoehorned in. You're not a secret agent, there's no grand conspiracy to unravel or Gibson to hack, you're just a guy at a store who wants to make a phone call. I'm not saying that elaborate puzzles are incompatible with this serious contemporary tone, they have their place. By the way, if you're wanting to go into this blind, I'm going to start dropping some spoilers, so now would be the time to stop watching. Okay? Good. Now, the main crux of the plot kicks off when somebody tries to rob the store while you're in it, and that happens pretty soon into the game. There's a section later on where you have to escape from a locked room, and that kind of complex improvised solution type puzzle is a perfect fit, using whatever resources you have to hand to escape a tense situation. That works. I feel there's a reason games with grittier themes can tend towards player choice instead, because that avoids having to implement puzzles that are sufficiently difficult to tax the player without disconnecting from reality in a way that undermines the theme that the game wishes to employ. I say wishes to employ because I don't think Repentant succeeds on that front either. The writing comes off as very trite. Now, you don't have to have lived through something to write about it, of course. God knows I don't believe Stan Lee was ever web-slinging across New York, but it's as if they thought, what would I expect a violent drunk to say, and wrote down the first thing that came to mind. You can almost predict what some of the characters are going to say because they're basically stereotypes. The repentant criminal, the good person driven to do bad things, the complete and utter psychopath. It almost overrides whatever attempts at characterizations are actually there because your brain goes, yep, he's the evil one. That's not to say the story has no twists, although the advertised unexpected ending is a bit hyperbolic, and if you abstract the plot down to its main story beats, I think there's something there. But it doesn't work how Repentant does it. This runs the gamut from incompetent to edgelord, as if they wanted to make a mature game and picked the first subjects that came to mind. Even the main theme of the story, a man repenting for the sins of his past, comes off as a bit of an immature fantasy. A violent, brooding hero who might be okay if he just does one last thing right before the end. We've seen it before, and frankly, we've seen it done better. Could be that the game's failures in other departments are giving me an overall negative tone, but that's how it comes across to me. This is all a bit of a shame because there's some basic components here that really work. The aforementioned artwork and music set the right tone for the tale it's trying to tell, and the overall story itself could have worked had it been done better. This goes right down to the gameplay mechanics too. You've got a one button interface with pop out inventory, but it makes you drag the items instead of selecting them. There's an option to highlight hotspots in the scene, which is A, limited to 20 uses, and B, only lasts about 3 seconds before disappearing again. Then again, 20 uses is probably enough for the entire game. It takes about an hour and a half to complete at most and only has 5 individual scenes. Now, taking into account the quality of the artwork and the music, plus the inclusion of full voice acting, and I would say the £5.19 price tag is about right. However, I can't recommend this. It drew me in with flashy art and morbid music, but it failed to back up the gritty themes with anything of sufficient substance. Plus, you can't double click to warp through exits. Hello, thanks for watching to the end. If you're so inclined to leave a comment, a like, a dislike, whatever you fancy, please do. Or if you really like what I'm doing here, I do have a Patreon if you want to contribute money. Links in the description. Thanks again, and cheerio.
Great customer service skills you have there.